to the DePIN podcast. Excited to have Doug from Livepeer here. This is a podcast. I'm Tom Trowbridge, the host. This is a podcast where we go into everything DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure networks. First, we've got to get that definition right because there's plenty of people out there who don't even have a great idea of what DePIN is. So I guess first question, toss it off to Doug right away. How do you define DePIN?
Good question. Good question. Yeah, I think DePIN is a new term coined by, I think, Sami Kassab, a research analyst at Masari, that's come to popularity over the last year. Decentralized physical infrastructure networks is what it stands for. But the kind of the trend or the area or the category that many projects have been working within, for many years has been essentially work networks, resource allocation networks, where blockchain-based token incentives are used to coordinate resources globally, typically physical resources, be it hardware like storage and compute, or physical access points like Internet of Things networks, or wireless access points and bandwidth-based devices, to even ranging to things like vehicles and sensors these days. So the notion is these are networks that coordinate resources that can be put to work by users through kind of open access blockchain coordinated networks.
Yeah, listen, that's exactly how I think about it. I'd also add that it's sort of, in many cases, it's crowdsourcing infrastructure that is put together and made into a network by a software layer. And we're at a particular point in time where both the infrastructure, physical infrastructure that people have has advanced to a level where there's excess capacity that can be used, whether storage or whatever, compute, whatever, right? And the next thing we've advanced to is where you have enough actual software development that you have the tools to put them together. And the third thing is crypto economics, which helps create trust and incentives that make this work. So we're sort of at the point in time where none of this could have existed at all, much earlier. So with that, Doug, how did you get into? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the space. You're one of the OGs. You were in DePIN before it was DePIN. So tell us a bit about your journey here.
Okay, yeah. As mentioned, my name is Doug Petkanics. I'm a software engineer by background, but always an early stage tech entrepreneur. I work on Livepeer. We'll talk a little bit about Livepeer, but it's actually the third startup that I've worked on with the same co-founder, Eric. We had this interesting moment back in 2016 when the previous startup that we had been working on was sort of not successful because it was deplatformed from big tech due to them changing their policies, their APIs on us and working direct with our customers. And we said, never again are we building a business that's reliant on Apple, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest for our distribution. We only want to build on open source software and sort of open access platforms. And that just happened to be at a time when there was this great new open developer platform emerging called Ethereum. And Ethereum brought the superpower of allowing you to actually create and embed incentives into open source software in ways that would get people to contribute to that software, run the software to form networks where they could actually benefit economically as those networks were growing. And Livepeer is focused on video and video infrastructure. We can talk more about it, but we saw a lot of opportunity to create a great open network and open software stack for video that coordinated all these idle resources around the world, like you just mentioned, as it relates to what DePIN enables. So yeah, happy to dive in, but I think that's the starting point.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into it. And I want to ask a question about your background again, but before we do that, let's get into, Livepeer, what it is, how it works, why it's better than centralized alternatives, why you were drawn to that as a particular solution, and also when, because I think you left out how long you guys have been working on this, which is I think pretty unique here, and given how many people are entering this industry now.
Yeah, so Livepeer's mission is to be the world's open video infrastructure. Video is 80% of the traffic on the internet, and it's how we learn, communicate, work, get entertained, etc. And it's only growing. But that takes a tremendous amount of infrastructure to actually provide the compute and the bandwidth to deliver video to everyone seamlessly around the planet. And back in 2016, we set off on this mission. So we've been working on this 7.5, nearly eight years now. And we saw that decentralization brings a lot of benefits to video. We saw how important video was, and we had done a lot of video engineering previously in our startup. So as Ethereum was emerging as an open developer platform, people were building open money and financial networks. People were building other early DePINs like Filecoin and IPFS and Swarm, for example, were building storage networks to allow sort of cost-effective and open access storage of data for the internet. We saw no one was building sort of this real-time media layer, real-time compute layer as it could be applied to the medium that we cared a lot about, which was video. And that started us on our journey. So, fast forward many years, our users are video developers building applications, building things that look like YouTube or look like Twitch. They need to access infrastructure that can ingest video, transcode video, store video, distribute video to the millions of users around the world. And typically they would have had to pay high prices to big cloud providers or SaaS companies to do that. Using the Livepeer network directly, they can do it in an open access way, far more cost effectively, up to 10x more cost effectively than using the big clouds, hopefully with infinite scalability and high reliability as well.
So you think you've got better scalability at a 90% cost difference, right?
When it comes to the compute aspects of video, transcoding, that's absolutely right. Can stand by that. That's what the Livepeer network's bread and butter. We have open source software and product built around this that adds many other video capabilities. And there we see, half to 2/3 cost reduction over a lot of the cloud platforms.
Awesome. And give us a second for people that don't know, explain transcoding for a second, because that sounds,
Yep.
I'm not sure everyone knows what that is.
Yep. So when video is captured, it's typically captured in really high resolution format, maybe 4K or 1080p HD format, right? And when you go to watch video over the internet, let's say you're watching a Netflix stream, you're not always watching that 4K option. You might not have enough bandwidth or a strong enough internet connection or a strong enough device that can actually request all that data and process it. So there's this technology called compression that you've probably heard of, and it's taking these big, heavy files and compressing them down into smaller files so that they can be delivered over the internet with less bandwidth and stored with using less data. Critically important for high quality video delivery. If you've ever streamed video and you notice the quality changes as you go, that's your video player automatically adjusting to like, hey, there's a slight disruption in the amount of bandwidth I have available. I need to actually not request the 4K version. I need to request a smaller version. And so the process of processing video to take that HD version and convert it into 40 different formats and bit rates so it can be delivered to different device types over the internet at different connection speeds is called transcoding. And that's a very expensive process and very compute heavy process, typically performed by GPUs or graphical processing units. And that's what the Livepeer network of hundreds of nodes and thousands of GPUs are there to perform really cost effectively.
And why is it cheaper? Where are you sourcing this, and why is the cost? Explain to people kind of, one thing I think about DePIN is the networks almost, theoretically they exist to be cheaper, and they exist because they're usually using under or sunk underused resources or sunk costs where people have a different cost structure than if they were purchased for purpose. So is that the case here? Can you talk a little bit about, make people understand that this is actually a durable, enduring price advantage?
Yeah, great question. You highlight one of the two reasons that it can be significantly cheaper, and that's because there's so much idle supply of this compute power that's already out there in the world, sitting in data centers. It's already bought, paid for, deployed, and potentially deployed in a working business model But sometimes it's idle, or sometimes some of the resources available are idle. And to the owners of that hardware, DePIN networks like Livepeer present an opportunity for them to monetize it when it otherwise be doing nothing. It comes at almost zero opportunity cost, and they earn additional revenue. Um, Now it can be cheaper for that reason because it's already deployed, it'll paid off. It's not like an app developer has to go buy their own GPUs and have them running whether they're being used or not. They can just pay as they go. Uh, the fact that there's so much idle supply, and these node operators are competing with one another to earn the revenue that's available, means that there's price competition. And just like in any free and open market, you see those who are providing the highest quality of service at the lowest possible price being the one who win the work, who win these transcoding jobs and are competing for fees. And so the ability for them to compete on price is good for the user. It's good for the consumer, and that's a powerful input.
Well, listen, you've been doing this for a while. Tell us about the journey of adoption, because if you can offer a product that's, between, you said 50, 90% cheaper, I think most people would be like, well, of course, everyone would shift to that product. But the reality, I think, out in the world is a little bit different with relationships and trust levels and kind of you name it. So help us understand kind of the adoption challenges that a pure price play, that make a pure price play not sufficient, I guess.
Yeah, I think the Livepeer network has been accessible for transcoding alone at a cost-effective rate for years now. So you might say, why is the whole market not using Livepeer? I would say, we realized in midpoint of this journey, it's not a if you build it, they will come scenario. It's actually you have to build the killer product, and you have to plug into the existing markets with that product in a way that makes it easy to buy, easy to integrate, that it meets the full needs of the user with the problems that they actually have and care about and prioritize, right? And so if you look at the video streaming industry, $250 billion industry by some estimates, it's been around for 70 plus years, and there's a very fragmented and wide ranging set of different technology stacks that all work in different ways for different use cases, and all consume different products, right? And it's probably not a surprise to you that technology stack never considered, well, the way that our video stack works is that we run nodes that talk to Ethereum based decentralized networks. And these nodes are funded with cryptocurrency, and we have to refill them as they go. And we have to interact with them through, decentralized APIs and these sorts of things. Right. So something we've done that was necessary to gain adoption is, we've built nice API sort of SaaS type wrappers on top of this network where, there's a company called Livepeer Studio. It runs a bunch of Livepeer nodes all around the world. It puts nice developer APIs on top. It bundles it with other video products that people need. And sort of that packaging is what actually goes to market. And that motion requires sales. It requires marketing. It requires account management, just like you might see in the traditional world. And the result is it offers a product that's cheaper. And as a result, that thing is growing. That thing is what gets adoption. It powers over 3 million minutes of unique video ingested per week, and 3 million hours of video watched across all of its users in that time period. It has been growing nicely, adding mainstream use cases, gaining credibility in the industry. I think it is primed to take market share and compete to take market share from many of the established video players in the coming years.
Well, when you think about it, you've got, in some sense, let me back up. There's a variety of people in either the Web3 space or even the DePIN space whose target market is also Web3 and DePIN, and that's great and that's fine. But scale exists in the Web2 general world, right? And so you're out there fighting the fight in the real world out there, and that's frankly, as much as we love the space we're in, our space is this little tiny thing, and the whole world out there dwarfs it. And so getting adoption out there is how this whole industry scales, right? And so you're at the forefront of that. Relating to that, can you talk about token economics and how Livepeer token works? How does it factor into usage? Just sort of the whole setup there.
Yeah, the token economics in Livepeer exist to incentivize the supply side of the network, these infrastructure operators, the GPUs, to come on and make them available on Livepeer and compete in this price marketplace. The reason that they do that is because over time they're earning the Livepeer token, they're becoming, owners in the Livepeer network, and by doing so, they're positioning themselves to earn more and more of the fees that the network generates in the future. So the basic way the token economics work, it's called the work token model. I think we pioneered this at Livepeer 7 years ago, is those who want to do work on the network stake some token. And the proportion of token they've staked is approximately the percentage of work that they have the right to compete for and perform on the network. So if a node operator has staked 10% of the tokens, then they can compete to win 10% of the work and therefore earn 10% of the fees the network generates. And so as the network generates more and more fees, then that 10% represents a higher number in dollars, essentially, because the users are paying ETH, but you can think of it as they're paying dollars to these node operators to use the network. So the more fees the network generates, the more it's used, the more the percent of tokens that the user owns is worth in terms of being able to do work. Now, before there's a lot of work on the network, a lot of what the node operators who are staked and any token holder that stakes on their behalf through a delegated mechanism is earning is a proportion of the new Livepeer tokens that are emitted each day, right? Livepeer's inflationary, new tokens are emitted each day. It goes to those who are staked on the network and doing work. It doesn't go to those who are not staked. And what that means is those who are committed to the network, they're staked. Their stake is securing their work. It can be slashed if they maliciously attack the network and cheat. They're growing their ownership. They're earning right now a 40% annual sort of increase in their percent ownership on the network relative to those who are not staked. And so that incentive is what brings on the supply and ensures there's a bootstrapped network that's available, and there's always more supply than demand on the network. And this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll stop talking here. It has a really powerful second order effect, which relates to one of your previous questions. How can the network be cheaper than traditional cloud platforms? If these node operators are earning a bunch of inflationary Livepeer token that they perceive to have value, that is covering or exceeding their costs to run this hardware on the network. That means when they're competing for work on the network, they actually don't need to charge as much to cover their cost or turn a profit. They can offset what they need to charge with this inflationary Livepeer token in the early days of the network. And so you can actually see the network be really cost effective or almost free to use for users. And that should attract more users and start this flywheel of more users equals more fees equals more supply side competing. And you end up with this robust marketplace that's really competitive for encoding. So if you have any questions, ask them, because I talked about.
Well, I mean, that's super interesting because Fluence, we're a cloudless compute platform, so we are doing something somewhat similar, but not obviously related to video. But we're doing compute, and it's also CPU based. But we do the same thing where compute providers stake, and then they earn rewards based on stake, and then they also those also shift into more fiat based payments for useful work. But there's a similar concept in terms of the stake is required, delegated or not, to prove trust in the network, much the same way yours is. And I think that's probably common to most DePIN platforms. Really interesting. And I guess the other point here, which is obvious, but I just want to mention it because I don't think we made it explicit, is that stake then is relevant because everyone who is not staked is effectively getting diluted. So if you are on that network, your strong incentive, especially at a 40% APY, is to be staked. So if you believe in Livepeer and you hold the token, you want to figure out a way to be staked. If you want to figure out a way to be staked, that means there should be a lot less available, which should help create that flywheel as well, right?
Yep, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's sort of that staked token is sort of long-term committed to the network, right? And like you said, if more people are staked, there's sort of less um, token available out in the market just for pure speculation or things that don't necessarily help or accrue value. You want a good amount of the token staked. We target 50% of the tokens to be staked on the Livepeer network, and we actually have built-in incentives to try and ensure that when there's less than 50% of the tokens are staked, the inflation rate each day ticks up a little bit. And that means there's more tokens issued only to those who are staked.
Oh,
That
well,
APY, if you will, increases, right? And when more than 50% of the tokens are staked, that inflation rate automatically ticks down a little bit and says, well, we don't have to pay as much in inflation. We don't have to print as many Livepeer tokens to incentivize people. Um, and the target is to keep a healthy balance right around that 50% stake mark.
that's great. Yeah, that was exactly my next question is how is that APY set? So you're sort of you're incenting to have it be 50% plus staked. And so if it went to say 75, you could see the rewards drop to, you tell me, 20% or something along those lines.
Yeah. The inflation rate on the whole network is actually 16% per year at the moment. And that's the thing that fluctuates up or down automatically. But because that 16% only goes to, at the moment,
The
the
stakes.
41% of people tokens that are staked,
Right.
and there's some ETH rewards for the
They get
fees,
those
it adds
rewards.
up to the 40% yield, right?
Super.
But yeah, we've seen it go as low as, um, you know, 4 or 5% sort of annual yield on your staking when there was a lot of token staked for a long period of time. And other than the very early days of the network, this is actually the highest we've seen it be in 4 or 5 years, due to being just
Hmm.
below that 50% mark for the last year plus. So it's a pretty attractive time to stake token and get involved in the network, especially considering some of the exciting things we have coming up soon with adding more job types to the network soon.
Well, and that's where I wanted to go. So yeah, tell us what's coming on to the network next.
Yeah, so Livepeer has been transcoding video for years and building video product for years. Um, there's something exciting happening in video and all forms of media that I don't think will be a surprise to anyone, which is artificial intelligence is having a huge impact on this landscape, particularly generative artificial intelligence, where users can type prompts and those prompts can
Get
either
images
return text or images or
like Google
videos.
Gemini.
Yep. If anyone has seen the OpenAI Sora demos, these are amazing videos that are generated just from user prompts. And they haven't released that. They're going to release it this year. There's open source versions of those types of models that are available to play with, but they're maturing quickly. And unsurprisingly, all the video applications, thousands of them that are built on Livepeer, many of them are thinking about how do we integrate generative video into our products? How do we let users and creators and marketers, type prompts and get amazing generated videos out without having to hire cast, crews, cameras, sets, locations to create video. And so doing that is amazing. It's going to change the world, but it's so expensive in terms of compute. It can take, um, you know, 60 minutes of GPU compute to output a 30-second generative video. And you can imagine how much that costs. It costs dollars. And, imagine building a product where you just let users type prompts and you as the app
You're
have to
eating
pay
it.
dollars of compute in order to give them a result. Um, you know, the same GPUs that do transcoding on the network and are aggregating our DePIN network, that is the hardware that's needed to do generative video. So we're bringing these capabilities to the Livepeer network, putting this DePIN network to use for generative video and other AI video capabilities, and really excited about that. I think it could 10 or 100x the volume of usage for the Livepeer network in a short period of time. We would hope, though we also have learned you have to build it, you have to productize it, you have to plug it into the market in a way when they consume it. And we've learned a lot doing that journey, and have sort of a secondary journey to go on to bring these capabilities onto the network. in a way that's complemented by our existing product and user base.
Well, I mean, you could. So let me phrase that back a little bit. So obviously, generative AI is growing, and there's a huge amount of interest in it. To the extent that covers images or particular video is directly relevant to you, it's very expensive. It takes lots of video and it takes lots of compute power. So anyone who had any price sensitivity, that's going to be exacerbated by this because of the additional compute demands, which makes saving money and using your network that much more relevant. And it's happening the time after you spent the blood, sweat, and tears to kind of make it suitable and adoptable and usable for the traditional Web 2 community. So you think this is kind of a terrific confluence of both your project's maturity and the market moving in a way that should be more sensitive to the attributes that you guys have. Is that accurate?
Well said, Tom. You nailed it.
Well, listen, tell me. So, how big? You said 10 hundred. Give us some metrics. How big can Livepeer be? Like, tell us the sort of the blue sky view here. Where do you think this goes, and where do you think you are in 5 years, 10 years? Like, how do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a brave new world, right? Because you see what it means to type prompts and generate images or videos, but like in videos in particular, these products are hardly released yet. We don't know how marketers are going to use them. Creators are going to use them. Film producers are going to use them. And when you do, you'll better understand the sort of explosion of what the market potential is. I think it's safe to say it's going to be huge. And I think one of the best proxies for this is actually looking at the growth in the revenue of the chip makers that create the chips that are used to power this generative AI movement. If you look at NVIDIA, the company that makes the GPUs that everyone's buying to run generative AI, their data center business revenue grew from $4 billion a quarter a year ago to um, to $10 billion 3 quarters ago, $14 billion 2 quarters ago. I think $18 billion last quarter alone, and they're totally sold out of the chips just to do generative AI, and that's largely just for text and images, which require far less compute than video alone. There's a huge shortage. Half of those were bought just by 4 big tech cloud companies alone. You can't even access these from NVIDIA unless you're doing $100 million buys. So there's a shortage, an incredible growth in the business isn't slowing down. More compute requirements are coming rather than less. And so, using the Livepeer network to access the type of infrastructures that can do this, if it's cost effective, seems like a no-brainer opportunity that could be huge without knowing
Well,
exactly how and where people will use
well,
these.
listen. On that point, though, if there is so much demand, like, doesn't that impact the availability of your kind of supply of GPUs, of chips? Like, how do you? That sounds great, but then you also like, wait, hold on a second. Does my supply side impacted at all by this? Will you have a supply shortage and able to meet this demand?
It's a good question. I do think there's some unknowns. In video, we had this huge structural advantage where there happens to be video encoding ASICs on these GPUs that are not used for anything else. In millions of GPUs that were already deployed for crypto mining, rendering, gaming, etc. So there's just this infinite supply available for AI compute. Not necessarily the case, but I do think there's a couple dynamics that even though there's a shortage, play to the favor of open DePIN networks. One of them is um, reservations and pre-buys. I mentioned you can't get access unless you're doing a huge buy of hundreds of millions of dollars worth. And then when these things are packaged up and they're passed on to users, users can't get access unless they're reserving 12 months of capacity and doing a 12-month reservation. So just look at that one for simplicity's sake. If I need access, but I have to reserve a fixed amount for 12 months, then that means there's a good chance that sometime during that 12 months, before I've built up to ramp to hit my peak usage and done my implementation, a lot of that capacity that I had to pay
Is
for in reserve
unused.
is sitting idle. And
Hmm.
what can
Hmm.
you do? You can make them
Interesting.
available on open access DePIN networks to monetize and
Yep.
get whatever money back you can, right? And that's where this sort of the open
Hmm.
access, global accessibility, um, crypto-based payments that settle, regardless of registration in Rails, become really attractive. Because if you can just put them on a DePIN network with the snap of a finger, that's one thing. But if you need to go through a 6-month BD sales cycle and do sales agreements to like some other vendor that's going to make access of some of your idle compute, that's really inefficient and has a lot of externalities in terms of BD costs, contracts, legal review, overhead. And it just seems less efficient than making them available on DePIN networks. So I think that's something that works to all of our advantage.
Super interesting. That's a convincing answer, no doubt. Taking a different tack here, you've been doing this for a while, leading this project for more than, closing in on a decade, I suppose. There've been, it's obviously there are easier things to do than to be an entrepreneur. There's easier things to do than be an early pioneer in Web3. So I guess I'd say what any experiences that you draw on or have been helpful in your journey in making you effective at what you do. Anything from either earlier entrepreneurial endeavors or big companies you've worked at, or other life experiences that have been instrumental in helping you kind of push through and grow this business.
Yeah, good question. I think there's two things that come to mind. The first is a hard learned lesson that it's less important what you work on; it's more important who you work with. And we spend so much time, you know, of our lives working that one of the most impactful decisions you can make is like who you're spending that time with and that you enjoy collaborating, you're constantly learning, you're inspired by the people you work with. And so I think, I'm fortunate to have, the best co-founders in the world and, an incredible, team and ecosystem and community of collaborators that, I get to spend this time with working on these hard, interesting, exciting problems every day. And so that helps me from the longevity perspective, but I think it's a lesson that should apply and help anyone. And I think it ties to the sort of the second point, which is like have a mission that you care about and that actually motivates you, and that you're excited to work on every day. Because yeah, your idea is going to change. You're going to have to pivot and iterate. You're going to realize you're serving a slightly different market or having a different motion than what you were excited about initially. But your core foundational mission of what you're trying to do should not. And that helps, that great group of people that you want to work with know what their North Star is, what the alignment is, and attract the right people to spend time working on this with you. And, in a fast moving area like crypto and Web3, sometimes it's tough to be mission oriented because there's so much opportunistic opportunity when there's booms around new trends and there's money available if you just lean into one trend or the other. And you might miss that when you remain like mission committed on one path. But the counter to that is that your lows are nowhere near as low because as markets turn and as trends, become less hot, all of a sudden everyone else is sort of, left with a hollow space where they thought they were, there was so much momentum, but you still remain mission oriented. People always need video, and people, the Web2 video developers don't care if the crypto markets are up or down. They need a cost effective infrastructure. And so, it helps the lows be less low, the highs be less high. Stay
Well, listen, I agree with all those things. I guess I'd say a couple things on that mission thing you were talking about. I mean, the way I think about it is you build something, you see what you're doing, there's value. And, when you start this business, you were not thinking of generative AI. That was not on your radar. I'm going to promise you, right? And so now you've been doing it, you stuck through it, and now generative AI is big and has the potential to next level the business, right? It was super interesting. If you headed off to NFTs 4 years ago, that would not feel very, if you wouldn't be very happy about that. So, nothing better than seeing a founder who has a mission and just sticks through it, and then the market evolves in a way that falls right into the lap of what they've been building for many years. And so that's terrific, and love seeing it. And I also say on having people you work with and other founders is also important. Lucky to have Evgeny and Dimitri at Fluence, and each of us have our strength and different focus. And I frankly have people who are sole founders I feel sorry for. The other thing is you've clearly got, you've got, founders splitting is kind of a key, one of the top reasons I think startups fail. But at the same time, it's also the key strength of many startups is in fact having multiple founders with different strengths who get along and can work with each other. So I would certainly echo strongly both of those points.
Yep,
And
absolutely. This stuff isn't easy, so you need people to lean on.
definitely. Another maybe last question here. DePIN overall, what other projects, what other use cases are you seeing out there? Or are you excited about? Tell us a little bit about the space, kind of from a high level, what you see, where there's opportunity. If you're either want to give someone advice to go build something, or someone who's investing, or just projects you think are interesting, solving kind of problems out there that you think are need to be solved and are being solved effectively by this this kind of network of crowdsourced network with crypto kind of software economic layer on top. What do you see out there?
Yeah, awesome. Of course, really excited about what you're all building at Fluence, and have been excited for a long time. So congrats
That's
on
the
the
right
launch
answer.
and bringing
You
that into
nailed it.
reality.
Right answer.
Yeah, yeah. There's a trend. There's an area that I'm excited about, and it's related to what I was talking about before in terms of AI being, this really transformative technology, maybe one of the most transformative technologies of, our generation. And there's a huge opportunity for DePIN to play a critical role in the AI movement, not just opportunistically, but actually in a philosophically aligned way that matters to society, which is AI is super important, but it's at risk of big tech capture and regulatory capture because the big tech companies have invested billions of dollars. They have a great lead. They deserve it, and they have they've created great products and algorithms. But what I don't really agree with or love is that they have been very aggressive at lobbying the government in the United States where I live, but other governments around the world as well, to now, after the fact, after they have their lead in early products, to take a heavy hand in regulating innovation in this industry in ways that make it impossible for startups and developers and innovators to afford to comply or to create things that have a chance at competing with the big tech companies. Because no startup can get check the regulatory approval check boxes with seven different departments, in the U.S. government before they go and, you know, train or fine tune a model, for example. And so, what we need open source AI models. We need open access infrastructure networks for researchers and developers to run these on that are accessible, not just in the United States, but to anyone around the world. And that is exactly what DePIN networks um, can be in terms of open access infrastructure, and what open access systems that are enabled and coordinated by crypto and blockchains can enable. And I think applying that to this open AI mission is important, is as important as anything else that we're applying these DePIN networks to. So excited about projects tackling that space, and we're a small part of it at Livepeer.
Well, listen, love that answer. I mean, that's exactly, Fluence wants to play a piece of that in that world as well. I mean, I guess the way I phrase it is that Google Gemini image generation basically showed the challenges of corporate AI, right? And it shows that you create a prompt and the model takes that prompt, adds a ton of stuff you can't see opaquely, and then spits it out, right? So that is crazy. And then I put corporate models into two buckets: those that have what do I want to call it? Those that have manipulation built in now, and those that will soon have manipulation built in. And that's it. Those are the two categories. There is no other category out there. And it's just a question of time. And so the need for open source, where it's auditable, and the data is trained on is auditable, and you can prove that your query was executed against the model without manipulation, also important, right? And also running decentralized, so that there is no single party that can be influenced about it. So, violent agreement with you and all of that. And Fluence is a CPU network, right? We don't do the generation of the GPU stuff that you guys do, but we can prove we can do data pipelines, and we can also run things on run front ends decentralized, right? Which is also super important. So completely agree with you on kind of that need. And I take it a step further and say that this manipulation, I think, is going to erode trust in the centralized corporate AI models, and that you will end up in a world of decentralized models that have more trust, because the answers just are more logical and make more sense. So we'll see. That's we're early in this journey, but we will see that. That's definitely important. Not the answer I expected from you, but certainly love it. Well, listen, thanks for being on, and we're going to follow all the success of Livepeer closely, and certainly be in touch. But thanks again for being on, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, great to be on. Thanks for having me. And yeah, anyone who's interested, check us out at livepeer.org and join the Discord. Best place to get involved in the community. So thanks all.
Excellent. Great.